Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Terry Steinwand, director here at Game and Fish. You've held that post for about the last 12 years. Today we're going to talk about 2017 and our upcoming challenges for 2018. Last year at this time, Terry, incoming Governor Burgum reappointed you as the Game and Fish director.
Yeah, and very much appreciated. I'm not quite ready to retire yet. A lot of things I'd like to see done out there, and I'm not saying somebody else couldn't do it, but I kind of want to lead the charge on some of those issues. And of course, the primary one of that is getting some habitat back. In the last 10 years, we've lost quite a bit of habitat, most of it in the form of CRP, but we're certainly losing tree rows and stuff out there right now that is good winter habitat. We have to do something to turn that tide around.
And last year about this time, we started out with, 3 winter blizzards back to back to back in December. That had to be a big challenge for you.
It was a huge challenge. Of course, that started in 2016, but the impact carried over to 2017. Honestly, if you took 6 to 7 weeks out from the end of November till probably early January, it really wasn't a bad winter. But there was that 7-week period there that it seemed like every other day we were getting a blizzard, just a pile of snow. And we probably had just an average amount of snowfall throughout the entire winter. It just happened to come all within 7 weeks. And we had some brutal temperatures. And of course, at that point, we were very concerned about the wildlife populations out there.
Of course, last year was a legislative year too. We had 30-some bills that pertained to game and fish. Right. What are some of those bills that we dealt with?
One was House Bill 1025, which during the recent advisory board meetings we explained out there, because it is an opportunity for nonprofit organizations as fundraisers out there. Over the past number of years, it seemed like every session some group would come in and want a special allocation tag, like a moose license to raffle off so they can use it as fundraising, an elk license or deer licenses. And actually the previous session, the legislature said, wait a minute, we're getting these time after time. When is enough enough? So we worked with the Legislative Council, which is a legal arm, or the legal arm of the legislature, and worked up what we thought was a pretty good deal. And right now, what that law says is all of the previous ones, which is Mule Deer Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Hunter Education Association, Outdoor Adventure Foundation, Injured Military Wildlife, those are all grandfathered in. But what the new law allows is we can, our discretion, we can issue up to 2 moose licenses, 2 elk licenses, 2 pronghorn antelope licenses, not to exceed 2% of what's available through the general lottery, and up to 10 white-tailed deer licenses also through an application process. But what it does, it allows a pile of good causes out there, and there are a number of them, that could get one of these tags and raffle them off, and then we get 10%. I wouldn't say we, the public gets 10% of the proceeds for a conservation project. And of course, we're going to ask what conservation project should we have out there, and we'll work with whoever gets that tag prior to that. But it's a great thing. That was one of the very positive things that came out of last session. Of course, our budget was another one. We can't operate, we can't do an awful lot with the budget, and actually we were one of the few, if not the only state agency that actually seen an increase, because our federal funds had been increasing, and if we weren't able to spend that, it would actually be reverted to some other state nationwide. So we actually seen an increase and some great things coming out of that too.
Okay. What would you say the single biggest challenge was in 2017?
Drought was absolutely the biggest thing. We work with our cooperators to hay and graze on our WMAs, and we've done that for years, so those really weren't available. We did allow some of our plots land, which is still private land, to be opened up for emergency haying purposes. Of course, the landowner has to agree to that. He or she has to want to do that. And of course, they get a lesser payment because that takes a little bit away of the habitat. And it's just our way of saying we want to try to help too. But that can be a challenge because with the lack of moisture we had a little bit of moisture in August, but probably not enough. Is there going to be enough carryover? Are we going to get enough moisture in the spring of 18 to get that regrowth? Because especially the ground nesting birds, they need that litter for the nest building. It's just bare ground isn't going to do any good, or just green up vegetation isn't necessarily absolutely the optimum.
Okay. Any other challenges in 2017 that we?
Certainly the winter. was
Right.
and loss of habitat. We're constantly, and I'll call it harping, because we constantly mention habitat and loss of habitat. That is absolutely the key. Using this past summer in the drought as a perfect example, it came up at one of our advisory board meetings. I was trying to explain the concept of carrying capacity, meaning there are only so many animals given the habitat that can exist on the landscape. And a rancher sitting in the crowd, you see him kind of like, you can only put so many cow-calf pairs on pasture lands, and that's exactly right. The difference is you also need the winter habitat, the thermal cover during harsh winters, and even during mild winters. It can get pretty doggone cold in North Dakota, so they don't have a pole barn or something like that. So we do need the tree rows, and if you have an open winter, a cattail slough can provide some tremendous winter cover for pheasants and deer and a lot of other things out there. Granted, it can be coyotes and raccoons and skunks also, but it does provide that thermal cover.
We had a lot of highlights in 2017 too, Terry.
Absolutely. I tell you, I got to give a great deal of appreciation and credit to our fisheries crew. We stocked a record number of walleyes this year, and people probably get tired of me talking about it, but we run the most frugal, cheapest fish production program in the nation. We collaborate with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through their national fish hatcheries in primarily Garrison, but also Valley City. We give them a grant every year that we collect the fish eggs out in the field. It can be a partnership of transporting depending on what manpower is available. They hatch them out, they put them in rearing ponds, and then we distribute them statewide to lakes that need the stocking activity. We do that for about $500,000 a year. The next closest state is $2 million a year. So that collaboration, that partnership has worked very well for us, as well as the federal government. So we're very proud of that, and we're very selfish about it, saying is we want to keep that collaboration going, but we want to maintain the partnership. So that's one. And again, with fisheries again, they took a record number of Chinook salmon eggs this fall. And that's no small feat, because we're not talking 20, 25 pound fish that they were dealing with. It was, I think they told me like 6 pounds, or 6 pounds was the average weight out there. And it looks like next year is going to be just as good. So a great deal of credit to them. A great deal of credit to our enforcement division that worked through some pretty stressful conditions during the DALPA protest. And granted, it was all law enforcement, landowners that were affected, the communities were affected. So it's just that, but very proud of our involvement in that. I know that's a little bit outside of game and fish activities, normal activities, but being partially a law enforcement agency, we did feel an obligation to the public in North Dakota and law enforcement agencies across the state that we help out in that. In terms of the wildlife division, tremendous data. We're using some, I won't call it new technology, but great technology in GPS collars. We're getting almost instantaneous information on that. We're using that. We opened up the first ever collaborative elk season on Standing Rock. It seems to have worked pretty well. We've gotten no complaints at all down there. And that, again, is a partnership between the tribe, the game and fish, and in particular, some private landowners down there. Another one is our Conservation Communication Division. We have some people working on stuff that normally the public would say, what are you working on that for? Well, it's part of our responsibility. On monarch butterfly, it was petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act a couple of years ago. So we have people working on that, and wind farms, and a little bit of everything. The communication division, these webcasts are just tremendous. We get a lot of use out of that. It's a lot of great people. So, and administration-wise, of course, we have the new, I'll call it a new licensing system, but it's a new licensing format that we received an awful lot of thank yous for it, because it is exceptionally easy to use. If you've been on there before, you have to put your last name, your birth date, and last 4 of your Social Security, or your driver's license number, or passport number, and it shows you a history of what you've got, whether it's bonus points or whether you got a fishing license. It's exceptionally easy to do. So across the board, there are an awful lot of bright spots to talk about with game and fish.
One thing we should mention too is deer numbers are heading in the right direction too.
They are. They're certainly not as high as we wanted to, but you're right. They're certainly heading in the right direction. And even though it's probably a little early to talk about it, I have talked to very few people, and I've talked to a lot of people about deer season in the last 2 weeks. I think I've only talked to 3 that have not gotten their deer, and 2 out of those 3 passed up on bucks because they weren't big enough. I don't, again, being director for 12 years now, I don't remember a year that I've received as many pictures of absolutely trophy bucks out there, just huge. A lot of happy people and some unhappy people because they didn't get a license, and I think a little envy and jealousy kind of creeping out there because, geez, I would have liked to have been participating. And we would love to have them participated too, but we have to look well into the future. If we start putting out too many licenses, then all of a sudden that deer is going to either decline or stay stable, and we want it to grow because our goal in another 3 years is to have 75,000 licenses available. And ultimately we're going to want higher than that because we have right around 100,000 applicants for a deer every year. We would like to have every one of those have an opportunity. May not be exactly where they want to go, but at least they have the opportunity to hunt deer.
Right. Any new issues that may come up in 2018?
There's always new issues. Of course, one of our priorities is going to deal with habitat is going to be the 2018 Farm Bill. You remember back when we had 1 million acres of plots, private land, open to sportsmen's acres out there, about 40 to 45% of that was actually CRP, which was a great deal for the sportsmen and women in North Dakota. It was ready-made habitat. Basically all we had to do was provide an access fee to that landowner, and a lot of people were very interested in that. We're down to about 1.5 million acres of CRP right now, and in the last general sign-up, only about 6% of the landowners that wanted to get back or get into CRP were accepted by FSA. And I'm not blaming FSA. There's a 24 million acre cap nationwide right now, and we'd like to see that go up, and other national groups would like to see it go up too. And also the scoring system that determines whether or not they're accepted, we'd like to see that change to be more favorable to places like North and South Dakota, because even though we had 6%, South Dakota was less than 1% acceptance, which, you know, we're kind of the duck capital or duck producing capital of the continent. Right. And of course we have that. You have ducks, you have pheasants, you have other ground nesting birds, you have grouse. There's just a lot of potential benefit to having that CRP in the landscape, and undoubtedly landowners wanted to have that amount apply for it, but the vast majority not getting accepted.
Right. A lot of good information, Terry. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to a great 2018. It's not going to be for lack of challenges, but my attitude is we're always going to have challenges. Let's look for and let's create some opportunities out there.
If you're looking for more information about hunting, fishing, trapping, or any other game and fish related topics, go to the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov. Once you're on the website, you can also link to the Game and Fish Facebook page, Instagram account, and YouTube channel for more information too. For Director Terry Steinwand and the rest of the staff at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us today for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.